Trinomial factoring isn't that difficult. Your first step is going to be to put them in order from the highest power down to the lowest power. Then you're going to factor out the greatest common factor. Do y'all know what GCF is? Okay. Then you're going to find the factors that of the whole numbers that will add or subtract to get the middle numbers. And then you'll check your work by distributing. So there's an example. Do those look familiar? Do what? So what is the first thing you have to do? Is it in the correct order? So what order would I write it in? Does that look familiar? Okay, how will it factor? Minus 2. Do you agree? Why didn't we factor out a GCF? There wasn't. Make sense? Okay. Looking at this one. Negative x squared plus 5x plus 14. What is different about that? Nope, you wouldn't multiply the whole thing by negative. Nope. Why can't we multiply or divide by a negative? Is there an equal sign? So we can't actually get rid of it. Instead, we're going to have to just pull it out. We're going to factor it out. So make it negative, and then what? X squared minus 5x minus 14. What do you mean? You just factor out a negative. Pull it out. Change the sign of every single term. Negative x squared plus 5x plus 14. Now, is that something that we know how to factor? How would you factor it? Okay. You can leave your answer like that if you want. If you would rather, you can make it negative x plus 7. Or you can make it negative x minus 2. Any of these three would be acceptable. They all mean the same thing. You'll see how that works? Okay. Looking at this one. You have to do what? Before you do that, what do you want to do? Put them in order. So which term comes first? And then what? And then, you'll see how that works? What are you going to factor out? A negative, a 2. Do you agree? The reason you want to put it in order before you factor, I had to factor out a negative on this one. If I hadn't put it in order, I might not would have known to factor out that negative. Does that make sense? So what would you make your first term? And your second term? And your third term? Minus 16. It just changes the sign because you're taking out a negative from this one. What is negative 2 times negative 6? Positive. Do y'all see how that works? Will this factor right here? What will it factor into? Y'all see how that works? You can leave that as your answer. Any questions on those? Okay. Looking at overlapping right triangles. How many triangles do you see? One is the little one, right? And then what is the other one? The big one. What is going to be the hypotenuse of the big triangle? B plus C, okay? Does that make sense? And E plus F is the base of it. Are these two triangles similar? They are. They've got an angle that's the same, and they're both right triangles, and you'll learn next year about this theorem for right triangles that shows that they are similar. Okay, but they are. So what does that mean that we can do? You can do Pythagorean theorem, but what if they only give me E on this triangle? What'd you say? You can use proportions. So what would you set up for the proportions for this one? B over B plus C. And then sometimes on these you are going to want to use Pythagorean theorem, but you'll have to use both on occasion. Okay, so that's one thing that sometimes you will have to use Pythagorean theorem. Like if you don't, you won't be able to go anywhere with a problem. Okay, so let's look at an example. They're wanting us to find A, B, and what are you wanting to do anytime they give you two triangles on top of each other? Separate them. Does someone want to go draw the two triangles separated? Okay. You gotta add the side links. Yeah. Do you agree? Okay, what would you set up to be your proportions? 6 plus 4 is 10. Yeah. And A over A plus B. What would y'all want to do first? Find C, use the first two. Okay, you would get 6C equals what? And so C would equal, will this reduce? Okay. But I can't really use that a over a plus b, can I? That doesn't really help me to find a or b. What am I going to have to do instead? Pythagorean theorem to figure out what a is. Does that make sense? Because this proportion, I don't know either one of them. So that's what I'm saying. Sometimes you'll have to use Pythagorean theorem because I don't have either A or B, so I can't really go anywhere with that proportion. So what would I set up to find A? So 36 plus 16 equals A squared. So A squared equals, take the square root of 52. Can I leave it as the square root of 52? It will reduce. Two times 2 times 13 gives you 52. Huh? Oh, 4. Yeah, 4, not 14. So 2 square roots of 13 would be your A. Does that make sense? You'll see how that works? So we know that A equals 2 square roots of 13, and we know that C equals 20 over 3. There are two different ways you can find out what B equals. I don't care which way you do it. One is to use proportions, and one is to do Pythagorean theorem. You can plug in A here, and then use this proportion and this proportion to find your B, or you can use Pythagorean theorem, 10 squared plus 20 over 3 squared equals A plus B squared. However, once you find whatever that number is, you're going to have to take off your A. Does that make sense? I don't care which way you do it. You would say 6 over 10 equals, what is A? That's what you would say. Does that make sense? Instead of A, I know A is 2 squared 14, so nope, leave it as a radical. Yep, what would you do? Okay, so 10 times 2 squared to 13 would be what? Hmm? What's 20? Yes, 12. And then what would you do? 8 over 6. Will that reduce? How will that reduce? 4 over 2 or 4 over 3? And that is what your B equals. Does that make sense? If you want to do Pythagorean theorem again, you can do 10 squared plus C squared equals this number. And then whenever you solve for it, just subtract 2 squared to 13. And that'll give you your B. Huh? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? You need to leave them in radicals on these. Do not write them as decimals. Okay? Leave them as radicals, whatever you get. Some of them are going to be really, really, really strange. I'll just tell you. Really weird, like square root of, like that one, weird numbers. Okay? So just leave them as radicals. Don't put them as decimals. You're going to have a lot of these on your test. They're not going to go away. Back. Any questions on these? Okay? See if you can factor these three. Do you agree with Jamar? Will someone go factor the second one? Do you agree? You want to do the third one? Okay. Yeah, you have to have -8 and +2. Okay. Mm-hmm. -8 times 2 is -16, times a negative on the outside is +16. Do you agree with C? Did Sean say don't change them? Does that make sense? Y'all see how these work? Okay. All right, here is an example of overlapping right triangles. See if you can figure out A, B, and C. They will be weird numbers. They're not going to be like whole numbers. Maybe one of them will. I don't know. But if you feel like you did something wrong, go back and check your work. For this one, I don't know why. I like to find the one that you use Pythagorean theorem for before I set up my proportions. You don't have to, but 5 squared plus 4 squared equals my A, right? 25 plus 16 equals A squared. So A equals the square root of 41, which I think everybody got. Does that make sense? How would I figure out what C would be? You didn't? What'd you get? How do you find C? 5/8 equals 4/C, right? So C would equal what? That'd be okay. If it was 11/3, leave it as 11/3, not 3 and 3. But if it's like a how would I find B? Okay, you would say 8 squared plus C squared equals I'm just gonna label it hypotenuse instead of A plus B. And so we know what C squared is. It's that. So you'd say 64 plus, yeah, whatever that is squared. I don't know what that is. Like you would add them together and you take the square root and you simplify it. What's the square root of 25? So we just have to simplify the 2, 6, 2, 4. It will reduce. It will reduce. Anyway, I just made it hypotenuse. But that was A plus B. So you just take off A from it. Okay, if you wanted to do it by proportions, you'd make it 41 over what? I mean, square root of 41. And what would you set that equal to, Emily? Sarah, you paying attention or are you talking? You said what? Is that right? Does it make sense? Do you know what to do now? Do you know what to do now? Emily, you know what to do now? Okay. Whoop. Does that make sense? And then 3 square roots of 41 equals 5b. And divide by 5. Thankfully, that won't reduce, so that's my b. The 3 and the 5. You just simplify the fraction part. Does that make sense? Kayla, you got it? Okay. Any questions on these? So are they weird answers on these? Yeah. Huh? I hate them. It's the same thing over and over and over and over again. Like I mean, like they're the same things over and over again. It's just you get weird numbers every time. Any questions on these? Okay. Your test is tomorrow.